Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Walker. I'm from AbilityNet, and I'm going to be hosting this session today and taking you through the discussions. It's about SEO and accessibility, just making sure that you're all in the right place. I can see we've got well over 40 people already logged in. Usually what happens with a 1 o'clock session is that by about 10 past 1 we'll fill up. So we'll go fairly slowly through the introductions and be ready for when the majority of people are here. If there's anybody who has any particular accessibility needs or has requested any help, please let us know by email. We are tracking emails. If you've got any requests or any problems, that's mark.walker@abilitynet.org.uk. We also do have live captions available. You have to go onto a different screen to do that through a browser. You go to www.ai-live.com and you use a session code, which is SEO A2606A. I can send that to anybody who requests it by text as well. So what we're going to do today, we do monthly talks and workshops and webinars around accessibility. Today, we're looking at a particular SEO, search engine optimization. How can ensuring the accessibility of your website improve your SEO performance? So we're going to be talking to an expert, Gerry. We'll introduce him in a moment. And our own resident expert, Robin Christopherson, will be here talking about accessibility. We're looking for top tips. We're thinking about best practice, and we're particularly interested in your questions about SEO and accessibility. Whether you're here from an SEO perspective or an accessibility perspective, there's a lot of common ground, and we're interested in exploring that. If you do have questions, there is a questions panel on the control panel. My question is, can you hear me? So I'd be grateful if anybody could use the questions panel to answer whether or not they can hear me, or the chat box. Stuart Bellis, straight in there, thank you. Paul, thank you very much. There's also a chat box which you can use to directly ask me questions, whichever one is preferable. So I've got a few yeses coming in. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody who's replied. Clearly it's working. It's always that weird thing about using a webinar when you're sat in a room more or less on your own, and there's hundreds of people on the other end, just making sure that the technology is actually doing what it should. So let me introduce the panel today. We have three of us together, and we have Robin Christopherson. Hi, Robin.
Hello there. And
Checking you're live still. Good. And Gerry, are you there? I saw you.
Yep, hi.
Hi, great. And we'll do some introductions in a moment, but there are three of us. As I say, I'm going to be sort of guiding us through the session and asking questions as we go along with the other two guys about SEO and accessibility. For those of you who don't know or haven't come across AbilityNet before, we're a charity. We're based in the UK. We provide a whole range of different services to disabled people. We're particularly interested in helping disabled people use technology at work, at home, and in education. This particular part of our business is about accessibility, web accessibility, digital accessibility. We generate income from the sales of services to pay for free services for disabled people. We do accessibility testing, user testing. We do design reviews. We have some labs in London where we do user testing. We've got a wide range of global businesses as customers, Samsung, BT. And one of the proudest things that we've done is we did the testing for the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympics websites. But today we have a guest from SiteVisibility, Gerry. Gerry, could you tell us a little bit about how you introduce SiteVisibility on the sorts of range of services that you do?
Sure. SiteVisibility is a SEO, content marketing. We do quite a lot of analytics. We do a little bit of paid search, social media marketing. We also run Brighton. Well, we used to run Brighton SEO, which is kind of a big SEO conference that is very popular throughout the UK. And of course, we have our own internet marketing podcast, which occasionally features me, but generally doesn't.
Okay. And what's your role there, Gerry?
My official job title is Technical SEO Director, although it seems to be that I'm the geek that basically answers any kind of technical analytics or technical SEO questions at all.
Okay, great. And your background in terms of you've obviously mentioned the that when we were talking earlier in preparation, you mentioned some of the work that you've done before. Could you just mention a little bit about your history in terms of jobs and work?
Yeah, sure. I've been a contractor, a consultant for a number of years, including the BBC. I was working on the homepage and some search operations. I've been working for the government on DirectGov and some other sort of major projects there, as well as a number of e-commerce clients, international SEO, and yeah, I've sort of got around quite a lot like that. I worked at Razorfish for a year or two as well, back doing analytics there.
Okay, cool. Well, glad to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. As somebody just asked, can we access the recording? That we're recording the video as we go. We're recording the webinar as we go along. We will have both a video and a transcript of the video available at the end. The video will be available probably sometime today. The transcript takes a little longer to come through, but certainly it's being recorded and is available for others. There'll be a link that you can share afterwards. So, first question, what do we mean by accessibility? We're going to talk about SEO and accessibility and the common ground. Just to be clear what we're talking about with accessibility, we use the term digital accessibility, so it's arranging across websites, apps, digital services, digital devices. But Robin, you're the head of digital inclusion at AbilityNet. What do you say when people ask you about the business case for accessibility? What do we mean by accessibility in terms of why we're doing it?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, it's always been a very compelling business case. Obviously, it's been a legal requirement since 1999 when the DDA first came out. But what we found most recently is that because of mobile in particular, then there's this huge overlap where accessibility actually makes great business sense for every single user. And to kind of give an example, someone like myself who can't see relies on things coded in a certain way so that they're friendly to my speech output software, my screen reading software. And increasingly, people who are, for example, driving and need to use their phone hands-free will be using speech-enabled apps, and so they're temporarily disabled. You know, they might be able to they might want to be able to send a text, so they might use voice recognition, which is another alternative which relies on the accessibility of the product, and then have the text that they just dictated spoken back to them, for example. Another case would be, for example, if you've got a small mobile screen on a bright sunny day and you've got 2 minutes to use an app or a mobile version of a website to buy a gift for someone, then if it's not got decent text size, good legible font, if the color contrast makes it difficult to see on a sunny day with your small screen, then that's, you're temporarily sort of visually impaired for that purpose, for that 2 minutes when you're trying to buy that gift. And that's the same for someone with a vision impairment 24/7. So the business case isn't just for disabled people, even though there are this 11 odd million people with disabilities in the UK. That's disability with a capital D. But then there are millions more with dyslexia, with age-related impairments, that sort of thing. And if you look at the average income, they've got around £10,000 per disabled person of disposable income, and that equates to this massive $100 billion of disposable income for that sector. So it's a very, very compelling case. And now that people are aware that complying with accessibility criteria actually makes your apps, your websites more usable for everyone, then everyone's kind of really sitting up and taking notice. And in case you're wondering how SEO relates to mobile apps, for example, well, you've probably heard about how difficult it is to get visibility in the App Store, where there are nearly 1 billion apps in the Apple App Store, for example, and the search engine is arcane, to say the least. So you have to be incredibly savvy about how you make your app more visible in that sort of quite tough environment with all these other competing apps.
Great, thank you. And Gerry, when people ask you what do we mean by search engine optimization, how do you explain the sort of technicalities and the purpose of it?
Yeah, sure. So there's two elements to it. One is basically making sure that you're actually featured in the search engines. This includes all search engines from Google to Bing. Across the world, there's lots of search engines, and we also now start talking about social search engines, Twitter search, and that kind of thing. but mainly we talk about Google. And when it comes to sort of being featured in the search engines, that means Google can find all of your content. It actually indexes it all. It basically knows what it's all about. And actually, then we talk about the visibility of it, which means basically rankings. We mean about if somebody types in some query related to your business, making sure that you're basically on the first page. I mean, one of the facts is very few people ever go past the first page. We generally retype the query in, so if we're looking for something, you're not there, but you're losing the traffic basically. The other thing is basically making sure that your website actually does do exactly what it's supposed to. So what I mean by that is that if you come through to it, you're kind of presented with the right page that you want people to come in on. And we basically spend a lot of time making sure that it's not just the website, but the right parts of the website and the right pages that's featured within the search engine.
Okay, great, thank you. And you're a marketing company in the sense of the work that you're doing with people. To what extent is accessibility part of your thinking already? And was it in terms of your previous work, was it something that you knew a lot about?
I don't know anywhere near as much as I'd like to. That said, I mean, it's something we've always talked about, and we've always tried to make sure that we kind of listen to and make sure we do right. So we do try to make sure the pages are kind of correctly set up. We do make sure that there isn't anything that's going to stop it from working right. A great example is a client which had a number of elements, sort of a huge amount of content sort of hidden in divs, and we sort of suggested they put in the sort of the jump content, the jump to the content type keyboard shortcuts and that kind of thing. But generally, it's not something that we've really kind of paid as much attention to as I think we probably should have done, because it's not something the clients have asked for as much as anything.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, it's really helpful to have you here, and I think good to know that that we're not pretending that this is some great industry that everybody knows everything about it. It's great. It's great to share knowledge, I think, and to sort of learn across those two areas. So, what we've done, and we've obviously had some chats about this. We've picked out 3 areas of good practice, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. And we've also picked a couple of examples that we think of bad practice that demonstrate the potential problems. The good practice relates to editorial quality, alt text, good link text, and making multimedia content accessible. And then the bad practice is to do with hidden text and doorway pages. So I'm going to ask you, Robin, to take a lead in sort of talking through this good practice stuff. Could you tell us a little bit about why good quality content and editorial quality is so important for accessibility? And then we'll hear from Gerry about how that crosses over into SEO.
Thanks, Mark. So on the next slide here, editorial quality. Now, this is probably the single most important area when it comes to SEO. I'm sure Gerry will agree, and it has a very significant impact on people with different disabilities as well. This is talking about clear, legible, concise, readable, logical content, editorial content being, words, the language that you use. And I'm sure you would appreciate that, with the millions of people with dyslexia, literacy difficulties, a vision difficulty, the more concise your text can be, the more to the point, the more understandable and applicable and appropriate, the better for people with different disabilities. You don't want to be wading through lots of verbose text if you've got a vision impairment or dyslexia. And I think I'm right, Gerry, in saying that the rule of thumb to take copy from the printed page to the web is to just basically cut it in half to try and condense it right down to the essence. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the screen is typically a lower resolution than print used to be. When people scan read twice as much, they're kind of driving far more, so they're not going to casually read through it. And the back button is so much easier to click than ever before.
Great. So tell us about how important the quality of the copy of the editorial, the language, the words is to SEO and getting your website up that ranking and crucially onto page 1.
The current trend in SEO basically is much more content focused than ever before. I mean, we talk to clients about something called content marketing, which says, if we build you great content, people are going to come, they're going to find it, and Google will kind of see the fact that it's great content. Poor content just does not perform. People don't link to it, people don't like it, and as a result, you don't get anywhere near the sort of results. And again, we particularly talking about the whole keyword focused. I mean, if you're not writing in the language that your users are searching in, they're never going to find you. Google is really clever at kind of understanding that Starbucks, for instance, is a type of coffee and all that kind of information, but it's not perfect. And you need to understand that if your users are talking about something in one language and you're using a buzzword for it, they're never going to find you for it.
Brilliant. So FAQ, an FAQ page, for example, is vital, isn't it? Because if people are searching on terms that are occurring to them, you know, questions they might have about your organization or whatever, or where can I buy such and such, then an FAQ page is the logical and sensible place to put a whole list of questions and answers, and that's kind of SEO, an SEO trap, isn't it, or bait?
Yeah, the problem with FAQ pages is often it's one massive long page about lots of different questions, and the problem there is the fact that from a user point of view, you often search for a particular question, you come into the page, and if it's not at the top, you're going to go straight back again. However, Google has recently changed its algorithm to say that what it's trying to do is answer questions. This is called the Hummingbird update, and they basically said that if somebody's searching for a particular query, they're not really looking for the keywords within that query. What they're actually looking to do is answer a particular enquiry. So they're looking for information or they're looking to buy something. And Google's trying to interpret that. So yeah, if you're answering a question, Google, that's exactly what Google likes, and that's exactly the kind of content that then tends to perform much better in search engines.
So with something like an FAQ page, just as we've been talking about with other content, if you can keep it short and sweet, not have huge amount of scrolling, try to keep things as concise as possible, then that would be really helpful.
Absolutely, yeah.
And let's talk about then page titles, which I think in our discussion that we had the other day, you said were probably the most important aspect of copy when it comes to, you know, the editorial consideration when it comes to SEO.
Absolutely. Page titles are one of the most valued parts of the page in the sort of Google algorithm, and it's also what people click on when they sort of see through the results. So if that page title says home or untitled or something which is completely inappropriate to the document, the page that they're coming through to, firstly, you won't get the traffic, and secondly, you won't get the rankings. So it's absolutely vital that you use the best title you can in that title tag.
Great. So it should be unique to each page. There should be a unique page title, and it should perhaps then have dash and then the name of the website as a whole as the second half of the page title, for example. And so for people that aren't aware, this is the title attribute in the header information. It actually doesn't appear on the page. It comes up in the title, in the sort of blue bar at the top of a browser, and it does, you know, feature very large in the search results listings. So let's talk about hierarchy of, you know, semantic content, because from an accessibility point of view, it's absolutely vital for you to have, you know, one H1 on a page, which is, you know, the main heading of the page, and that ideally should be similar to a page title, sort of summarizing what you can expect on that page, the sort of main topic. And then under that you should have a logical sort of child system of H2s that tell me as a blind person, for example, what are the next sort of important level of headings, and then H3s and H4s under that. But Google doesn't pay as much attention to hierarchy of headings as to the fact that there are headings there.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, Google classically did pay more attention, we believe, but we never know exactly how Google does it. So I might say something where somebody else might say something slightly different. We don't know exactly what's inside the black box of Google, but our research has always suggested that it doesn't really pay attention to kind of the hierarchy, but it does look at, for instance, a H1. Sometimes it will even take the H1 that you've got on the page and put that into the title when it displays its search results. So it does pay attention to things like H1 tags, but it doesn't necessarily care if you've got H1s and multiple H1s and H2s in the wrong place. I mean, one really bad example that we've talked about is the fact that on a lot of websites that you go to, the cookie statement is actually a H1, so it says privacy policy, cookies, do you accept the cookies in H1. So if Google did pay attention to all these, then it would cause way more problems than actually it would probably help with. So basically, the reason that Google doesn't pay as much attention to the H1s is because of the kind of abuse that we, when I say we, I mean the internet creators, the people that created the content, have practiced for so long.
Absolutely. And if you haven't got good page titles, they do just say home, for example, then like you say, Google might go looking elsewhere on an H1, say, to sit and replace the search result, title with that, because it thinks it's more informative. And if you haven't got a decent H1, then you might end up with a rubbish listing, title in your search results.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about nasties when it comes to editorial a little bit later on, but we'll just finish off with keywords. What's the sort of best way to use keywords? So this is slightly different than sort of making sure that all your language is as concise and applicable as possible. What can you say about, specific keywords to use?
So we try to find what the keyword is that people search for, and one of the things we do know is the fact that if we put the keyword in the title tag, if we put it in the H1, if we put it somewhere significant in the body, then actually that page does tend to perform better for that keyword. We are currently rewriting a lot of the H1's title tags and description tags for one client because they're just not doing it. They're putting the brand name, and then, for instance, if they've got a location in London, they're putting brand name dash London rather than brand name dash London and then what the services that they offer. So if it was, say, a television studio, instead of sort of saying London, I know a good example of a television studio name, of Rocker or something, they would put, they wouldn't actually include the phrase television studio. The problem with doing this is the fact that Google has actually come along and said other people have kind of learnt this, and they're actually stuffing the keyword in every single place possible. So it's surprising often when we read through text, they've actually tried to put the keyword phrase in every single sentence as often as they can, and that is really bad for SEO because Google will come along and just exclude it. So the keyword, the best practice for keywords is making sure you do use the keywords, making sure you do use them in the title tag, use them in the main title on the page, and also, where appropriate, in the body text, but don't stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So things that people used to do to game the system are now backfiring. So it's important to kind of be current in what advice you're getting or what research you do on SEO, because it's a movable area, where you really do need to be up to speed.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's talk about alt tags then. If we go to the next slide. So this is a really important area of SEO and accessibility, and again, as a blind person, but also it is equally true for other people for whom having a text description of the image, particularly when the image includes words, is really important. So dyslexic people, for example, might hover their mouse over a paragraph of text or a link, and there's some software that will read out that to them. And if they hover it over an advert which has got text in it, or on many websites the headings are actually pictures of words, it doesn't speak that out because there's no alternative text available. And for someone like myself, who relies on speech output, I'm lost as well. So let's talk briefly about alternative text. What's the sort of top advice you can give about best practice when it comes to providing alternative text to images on someone's site?
I think the best advice at the moment is basically to treat it as an accessibility thing rather than an SEO thing. So it is truly exactly as you say. It's basically the alternative text. One of the things we've seen, for instance, is display adverts, the banner adverts that we've seen on websites. And sometimes these will actually put in the size and dimensions in the name. So they'll call it something like MPU-16 homepage link, which is completely unhelpful when it comes to the SEO, and it's completely unhelpful when it comes to screen readers. So basically, it's understanding what the image really is, and if it will be treated as part of the text, so make sure you put the best text you can in it regarding both SEO and the accessibility.
Great. So what about links and the content of those? They could be image links, in which case they need alternative text, or they could be these classic click here or more, which we see quite often, which the accessibility consideration there is that someone like myself, a screen reader user, I pull all of the links on a page up into a great big long list, and sometimes there's 200, 300, 400 links there, rather than having to just tab hundreds of times through the page. And when they're pulled up into a list like that, then I really need them to make sense. If they just say click here or more, then because they're taken out of context, I've got no idea where that link's going to take me. So what's the sort of downside, or what are the implications for SEO of that sort of poor practice when it comes to link text?
So, I mean, Click Here is a great example. If you actually search in Click Here, if you actually do a Google search for Click Here, the top result is Adobe's PDF Reader. And the reason for this is because so many people have used the link text Click Here to go to Adobe's PDF Reader that Google actually thinks that that page is about Click Here. Basically, Google will actually take into account in consideration not just the on-page content, but how people are linking to it. Classically, you could do something called a Google bomb, which meant that if everybody linked to a certain page with a certain piece of text, even if they didn't have that text on that page, you'd get it ranking for that page. There's a lot of famous Google bombs, but Google's since unfortunately decided that we can't do that anymore, gaming the system like that. But it still does take into account this. So if you're linking to any page, you really have to link to it appropriately, and you're telling Google what that page is about. It's not just the title tags and the descriptions and the actual content on that page, it's all the other links coming into it. So Click Here is really bad for SEO.
Brilliant. And you were telling us the other day about another search that you can do where there's no title attribute, going back to the editorial that we were talking about a moment ago.
I'm trying to remember it. Which one was that?
Like page, is it unknown page, or what do you get?
Untitled page,
Untitled
yeah.
document.
Yeah, that's another Dreamweaver one. Yeah, basically Dreamweaver was the most popular software for creating web pages for a long, long time. But most people who were doing it's kind of like the last thing you do is you actually put the page title in. And it's amazing how often you just forget to do it. So once you put your website up, there's so many pages out there called untitled document. It's really quite scary.
Right, so while people are searching for Click Here, also search for Untitled Document if you want to kind of get a lot of legacy pages created in Dreamweaver.
Yeah.
So if we go on to the next page, we've got a really good example. This is actually an email, an e-marketing email that Mark got the other day. And this is particularly relevant because, okay, this is an email. It's not so it's not kind of search engine visible, although there are often web versions of these. If it says, this doesn't display correctly, click here to view it in your browser. So these often do exist online as well. But because it comes into your inbox and a lot of email clients have stripped out images for security reasons, then this is how Mark saw it. The image hadn't loaded yet. So what was it, Mark? A big red box?
Yeah, so the next page shows the image. It's a big red box, and then it's actually a lovely picture of a chameleon saying "Adapt to survive" or "Adapt and thrive" for a CRM company's demo.
Brilliant. So because there was no alternative text, it wasn't indexable in the online version, but for Mark, who has images stripped out, and for the thousands of other people as well who undoubtedly received this spam email, they didn't get any information at all, and they would probably not have clicked on the link to expose the image, to download the image, because of, they just couldn't be bothered. They had a big inbox and they wanted to go on to the next thing, and perhaps even, they're barred from doing that by the security settings of their email client. And again, the mobile parallel here is that mobile browsers often don't download images by default because of bandwidth considerations in this case, as well as security considerations too. So all of the mobile users who would get this email, or who would visit that web page online, or any website where there isn't alternative text images, then they would get nothing. So as well as it being key, absolutely central to help people with different disabilities, it's now very much a mainstream issue to do with the fact that not everybody is going to be getting graphical content by default.
It is also worth remembering that so many users now use Gmail. We get millions of emails every day, and I remember thinking to myself, actually, I saw a special offer come through. If I searched in my inbox for something on that page like Microsoft Dynamics, and if the keyword isn't on that page, it isn't in the email, then I've actually lost it. So when we come to sort of talk about search engine optimization, I think that optimizing your actual emails for the key phrases that people will actually want to search for later on is actually still key as well. So it isn't. So although you wouldn't consider Gmail to be a search engine, the content within it, I regularly do search back through my emails to find, related emails to something, something I wanted to buy, something I saw in the morning, but later on wanted to see, an event that I wanted to go to that I hadn't registered for because I was on the train. So I think there is the opportunity to kind of optimize your email for basically search within Gmail.
Absolutely. And another relatively worrying development in the last couple of days, from both an accessibility and an SEO point of view, is Twitter. And they have said that they're going to pilot a new retweet mechanism, which will allow people not to just add a couple of words or characters and then hit the 140 or 150 limit for a retweet. They've actually said that they're going to give people the full 140 characters to add a comment when they're retweeting somebody else's tweet, and to append that tweet as an image, as a picture of the text of the original tweet. And I guarantee that there won't be alternative text available there, because that's not how it works for Twitter. You've only got the certain number of characters, and that's the end of the story, and you can attach an image. So working within the parameters of what they've got at the moment, and believe me, every third tweet that I receive, which is just basically someone tweeting a selfie or an image, is lost on me already. But now I've got the prospect of losing threads as well, as people retweet and all I get is their comment and I don't get the original image. And because Twitter is an online, a searchable resource as well, then all the SEO for all of those retweeted tweets has disappeared as well.
Robin, can I just jump in and mention, particularly from my point of view, this reminds me about what we covered when we did an alt text. We have actually got a webinar for those of you that may have seen it before about alt text, and I think this is really relevant about good quality alt text, not just alt text. Making sure that it's readable, making sure that it means something. That seems to me that's a big crossover with the SEO stuff. That you don't just tag it as logo, but you actually try and write something which is useful to the screen reader, for example. But also that's going to work for SEO as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, we've had a brief conversation about the most appropriate alternative text, and yet it did quite happily fill a whole webinar. So please do go back and have a look at that one for more of an in-depth discussion about that. So if we move on to multimedia, which is the sort of third main area of or challenge or area of discussion around SEO, there is still a lot of multimedia content embedded within websites. A lot of it is embedded YouTube videos, or perhaps it's video content that's provided in a different player that's hosted, on the website itself, or perhaps it's Flash content when it comes to marketing, advertising, or perhaps in some cases functionality. And this is a big challenge when it comes to accessibility, and we've done a webinar on this as well. Multimedia content is often very challenging from an accessible point of view, and there are guidelines about making sure that your multimedia content is accessible. But let's just hear from Gerry about the SEO angle of multimedia and what the challenges are there as well.
Yeah, from SEO, I mean, Google actually loves video. I mean, it bought YouTube, for instance. You can mark up video explicitly for search engines, so you can wrap it to say, yeah, this is a video, this is what it looks like, and then in Google search results, it will actually show, a box that will saying this is a video. That's really quite simple to do generally. But it can't see within the video. So if you've got a lot of context in the video, for instance, if you've got a cooking guide or something like that, and it is just in the video, people aren't going to find the information within it unless you do things like creating transcripts and that kind of thing, and actually putting that transcript on the same page as the video. We were talking about this, and we were sort of saying, is there a way of doing it which means that it's not going to be hidden within a hidden div, it's not going to be all that kind of thing, because from a search engine point of view, although Google can see within hidden divs, it's not going to rank it particularly well. It does look at a page in the same way that a browser would. It actually kind of creates the page itself and kind of says, if I can't see this content, users aren't going to see this content. So what you have to do is basically make sure it is within an area on the page that maybe is a scrollable div or something like that, just to make sure that the content that you want to be ranked for is actually on the page. And long tail is really, really, really important to this. So if you're, for instance, doing a cooking recipe, then you have to make sure all the elements that you want to be ranked for are definitely in text and on that page if you want the page to come up in the search engine.
Absolutely. And here we've got an example on the next slide
Yeah, I realised
of
actually we could be asking for some top tips here, actually, Robin, because we've got this is a real example of something we're doing, isn't it? That maybe you could comment on as well, Gerry. We've got we did an interview last week with Jimmy Wales, who's the inventor of Wikipedia, and we're giving him a Tech for Good award, which is something that we run. And obviously, this is big news for us. We'll have a video of him being interviewed, and we were just trying to work out in the context of this SEO stuff what we would do. And now, Gerry, you're saying that although we may have we have got a transcript of the interview, so we could post that up. But actually, from what you're saying, that shouldn't. It would be better for that not to be a link on the page, but for that content actually to be on the same page as the video. Is that the dream ticket to have both on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the issues basically is the fact that the transcript page, if it's depending on how it's put on the page and things like that, if it was on a separate page, you're kind of losing from an SEO point of view the power of having that one page about the one subject with all the content on it. If there is a way of making it so as it's within a sort of what we call a div, which is like a box which allows you to put the content in, and you can even sort of say, this div is only X number of pixels wide high, and you have to sort of scroll through it. And that is totally accessible in that you can tab through it as in the same way normal content and scroll through that box. So there's no, in my knowledge, there's no accessibility issues there. Now, visually, it looks like it's a smaller box on the page than taking up the entire page, so it's not going to have any real impact.
Okay. And what about
and
dropping
that's a,
stuff into the YouTube description? I was just wondering whether we should be putting transcripts into YouTube. Would that, from an SEO point of view, would that be a bonus? We don't at the moment. We put a link, but
Well, we do that when we are optimizing videos. We tend to put quite a long description. We don't necessarily do a straight transcript. What we tend to do is find pretty much the transcript of it and kind of edit it a bit just to make sure that it is actually slightly better from a readable point of view. Because not all the time, it's amazing how often when we read through the transcripts, it almost doesn't make sense from just reading through that. So we sort of edit it slightly just to kind of get the point out of it. And we often do put those on YouTube, because we know that these videos will then come up a lot better. And I mean, YouTube is just another massive search engine. There's so many videos being put on YouTube every day. I can't remember the stats, but it is a crazy number of hours per minute or something. And so, you have to treat it like a search engine. You have to make sure content is optimized for YouTube in the same way you would for a web page.
yeah. And from
and
an
that's a really good.
sorry, Robin,
Sorry.
from accessibility point of view, in terms of putting content into descriptions on YouTube, is that a bonus? I mean, I know that YouTube isn't great for accessibility for some purposes.
It's certainly not the worst multimedia player out there, and there are better ones as well. That's a really good example of where having redundancy, which means alternative choices, is really useful. So once you've got a transcript, if you can then make them into closed captions so that basically subtitles for your video, then that would be the preferred choice for people with a hearing impairment. They can see perfectly well, they're watching the video, the subtitles come at the bottom, fantastic. And we would definitely advocate doing that. And also, though, because you've got the transcript, make that available as well, because those captions within the video aren't indexable, they're not searchable by YouTube. As Gerry mentioned, you have to tag your video file when you upload it. You have to give lots of these other keywords to make sure that it's findable within YouTube's excellent search engine. But having a transcript available as part of that description makes the whole content of the video available. And for somebody who is deafblind, for example, or perhaps just someone like myself who can't see, would perhaps just go straight to the transcript, because you can just read down through that at 400 words a minute like my screen reader does and get through it much more quickly. Or you can search through that text, because it's indexable, it's searchable, to get to the exact point that you want. You can't use the scrub facility in the player to zip to the place on the video that you want, because that isn't unfortunately accessible for us or for any keyboard. So yeah, that's a really good example. And what Gerry was saying a moment ago about having that div to only show part and to scroll down through it, or perhaps to have a button next to it that says show all, which would be useful for people for whom scrolling was an issue. This ability that divs have to hide all or part of text is a nice lead into our final topic, which is the most kind of enjoyable from my point of view, because it's payback time to be able to vent about all the stuff that people have done over the years to try and hide content, which hides it from everybody seemingly except us poor screen reader users who have to plow through it. So if we move on to the next slide. And hidden text, doorway pages, we've talked about good editorial copy, and we've kind of touched upon the fact that text can be hidden in certain ways, either using various methods that Gerry's going to outline in a minute, or talking about having nasty pixels or images on the page that have horrendous alternative text that are bloated beyond all reason, to include lots of text to try and game the search engines. But yeah, let's tell us a bit about that, Gerry, and whether it's something that is now as prevalent as it was.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were talking through this, and we were talking basically about some of the bad practices that still goes on. It isn't kind of disappeared at all. We found, there were web pages where we'd find a load of text in the source code, we'd look on the page, we can't see it. And this is not uncommon at all. We'd find it hidden in divs where you have to click it to open it, to find it. Often these boxes are actually marked up SEO text. So Google will probably come along and kind of find anything that sort of says SEO text and says, yep, they're trying to game the system. But we've seen it where it's hidden off the screen by basically saying that this is a box which is 400 pixels to the right-hand side of the screen. So on a normal screen you can't see it, but unfortunately screen readers can. And this text is totally indexable. Google will be able to come along and find this text. We found we check it ourselves by kind of selecting the text, searching on Google, and yeah, the pages do come up. So it is actually beneficial in some ways to SEO to do this. However, Google will come along and literally kick you straight out the index if it considers you're doing something which is that bad. It is pretty harsh at Google nowadays when it comes to finding stuff that's done wrong. I mean, a great one, for instance, is the sort of doorway pages. And one of the examples that we were talking about before was basically a supermarket's jobs search. A lot of people are searching for supermarket jobs, and a website had gone along and basically created fake pages for every single town in the country, along with talking about supermarket jobs and a load of. It was basically nonsense text. But it would lead you through to CV rewriting services and all this other stuff. And this website, because we can see this sort of thing, was getting a crazy amount of traffic from picking up all of the long tail job searches. When you actually look at the page and actually read the content was meaningless, it was terrible, but it was just sort of hoovering up all of that long tail search. Google came along and basically banned it one day. We cannot find that website anymore if you search for it. One famous example of this was BMW themselves. BMW, the famous car manufacturer based in Germany, they actually had their websites kicked out of Google for probably about a month or so one year. This was an old case, but it just demonstrates how Google will not differentiate between a small brand and a big brand when it comes to this kind of practice. As a search agency, we do not recommend doing stuff purely and simply because you will find that Google will come along and find it, and the people that can report you are your competitors. If you find that you're ranking number 5 for something, you want to rank number 3, and the guys in between you are doing dodgy practices. If you report them, you kind of get shifted up a couple in the ranks. And I'm not saying we'd do that, but I know a lot of other agencies would.
Great.
Thanks. So,
Sorry,
from an accessibility point of view, the prevalence of hidden text ranges from annoying to incredibly frustrating, and where people have hidden chunks of text that are relatively good English and is just additional content that they think would help, that will help their SEO, and it won't make me want to weep too much because it just feels like it's relevant. Maybe they've even taken the print copy and the half that they cut out, they've actually just made it invisible to the average user, and yet it's still indexable. But the worst case scenarios are where, like you say, there's hundreds and hundreds of keywords. There's a complete sort of blanket bomb approach to every last thing that they think they would, would be remotely relevant to this page. And Google's got wise to that, haven't they? And you're on dangerous territory if your websites employ those sort of tactics these days.
Absolutely.
So on the next page, there's a few other areas, Gerry, perhaps on and off site that people would want to that some pearls that you can give us about other things, other areas of SEO.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, getting it right in terms of getting the pages correct, there's a lot of little things that you can get wrong. It's quite simple. There's things like something called the canonical tag. If you get that wrong, it creates all sorts of issues. If you have something called spider traps, which means that you have parameters kind of going off to Neverland. It basically, there's lots of these little issues, but the significant thing is nowadays websites are a lot better than they used to be. Something like 25% of websites are now built on WordPress, for instance. And WordPress is great because it actually solves a lot of the issues for you. It's not perfect, but it does mean that you don't have to worry about a lot of the old school issues that we're still desperately trying to fix up. Basically, if your website, you can go through it, clicking through with a mouse, and you can find pretty much every page, and all of the pages relatively easy to read from from text point of view. That's pretty much getting most of it right. But there's always a lot more to it than that. I mean, it's basically making sure that Google does not use JavaScript, for instance, very well. It does use a little bit, and it often gets it wrong. So if you've got a menu that's exclusively made out of JavaScript, if you've got text that only loads up using Ajax, which means that it's kind of sucked into the page after the page is loaded, there's lots of those things where you kind of really need to make sure those things are fixed up. But it's really quite simple nowadays. It's great content on a fairly sort of flat platform. We do produce documents that are usually about 40 pages long when we kind of come to audit a site and things like that, but most of it is around making sure that the code is accessible, making sure there isn't too much code. It's kind of making sure that the site is as clean, as simple as possible, but the content is absolutely the focus nowadays.
And you're also talking, Gerry, about the one part of this being what's on site, but clearly the other part of SEO is about getting stuff right off site and having the right connections. And there's less of an accessibility angle there, I think, but I think it's useful just to think about, if, as you say, if you've got a nice, clean, tidy site, the code is well written and well produced, the content's been carefully curated, all of that's going to be good for accessibility. And then equally, there are other things you're going to need to do if you want to hit the SEO targets. Is that's going to be done mainly off-site, but get the on-site right first, and then you've got the basis for going out and telling the world about what you're doing.
Absolutely, it's like having the right foundations for a house. Basically, if you've got a good site, then you basically need to tell people about it, and that's the big problem. You can't go out and buy links. Google will come along and basically penalize you. But Google does base a lot of its algorithm on links coming into your site. So if you've got links coming into your site from blogs, from the BBC, from Guardian, from places like that, it's going to rank really well. And that's almost the most challenging thing when you first create a website, is how do you get those initial few links? And part of that is going out and using social media to find engagement. So you do talk to people on Twitter, you talk to people on whichever platform they're actually on. So you do make sure you've got the right Facebook page, you've got all of that kind of social media angle set up correctly. And you're connecting with the people who are in your industry. If you're talking about a farming website, you want to talk to all the farmers. Get yourself on Twitter, make sure you're tweeting with them all, and you'll soon find that the website will start to rank much better as long as you've got high quality content.
Great.
And I feel another whole webinar coming on the overlap between optimizing your site's visibility or your brand presence using social media, and what that and the overlap between that and accessibility, which leads us nicely onto the the closing sort of topic, which I'll pass back to Mark for, which is to summarize this overlap, the common ground between accessibility and SEO.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, really just to draw to a close, we've got. We'll move on to questions in a moment, just for anybody who has any. There's a couple of that have popped up, but I think that we just wanted to try and summarise some of the key points about the common ground between SEO and accessibility. Certainly, from the point of view of Robin and I talking about this some time ago, and then talking to Gerry in the last week or so, it's quite clear that there's a lot of common ground here. That getting accessibility right on your site is going to be good for SEO. And is going to deliver better performance in terms of SEO. And really, it's about that good discipline. And Google likes well-formed pages and good quality content, and we know that Google is the primary sort of audience here in terms of SEO interest. There are other search engines, and search has impact elsewhere, but Getting it right in terms of hierarchy, content, titling, and those sorts of things, which are going to be very valuable for accessibility, is equally going to be valuable for your search engine optimization. The other thing that we've picked up on is that, remember, you can't see images as text, which means they're not searchable. And that, again, is something which has a big impact in terms of accessibility, which will have a big payoff in terms of SEO. The links, making sure the links are meaningful, not just the click here or click, gives you power in terms of SEO, sort of big input in terms of SEO, but equally makes the site much more usable in terms of accessibility. The use of keywords and being careful about the use of keywords in terms of content, keeping the content simple, easy to use and easy to understand, that now is rewarded much more clearly in terms of search engine optimization, but equally penalizing this sort of keyword stuffing, which will then, as Robin said, this is payback time for him. All the amount of times you must have to listen to all of that junk that people have stuffed in there trying to pretend that they're talking about something when they're not. And then I think an underlying bit, there's a couple of things here about just being accessible in the broadest sense, almost just thinking about who your users are, making sure your content works for them, that you're thinking about what they're looking for. That should pay off. People are looking for questions. They're asking questions in search engines, and they want your content to deliver that back to them. So that's what a lot of the changes in search engines over recent years have done, is to make that link much clearer between this is what you were looking for and this is what you found. And then finally, something which I picked up from something that Gerry said is that there's like an inverted pyramid. Put the most important things at the beginning of the page. And again, that's going to have a payoff in terms of accessibility. Somebody trying to work out whether they're on the right page using a screen reader is going to get get that information much more quickly and be confident they're in the right place. So I'm going to move on to the questions and answers. I've got a couple of questions coming in. The first one, which has been asked a couple of times, I just reiterate that this is being recorded, the video. There will be a video version available. There will also be a transcript, which we pick up from doing the live captioning. So there will be content available afterwards, and we'll also share the slides. We'll post that up on SlideShare afterwards. So anybody who's interested in sharing this content, it will be around. And we'll also do a blog post afterwards of our own reflections on what we've learned. So I'm just going to pick a couple of questions out here. First one, a general one for both of you. Would mobile-enabled websites produce better results for SEO? Mobile-enabled means they're better for screen readers, so therefore that's better for accessibility in principle. But there's no tagging in Google for a site that is mobile enabled. So is there some benefit for a mobile enabled site that you could see over one that wasn't, in terms of SEO in particular, Gerry?
In terms of SEO, absolutely. Google loves responsive sites as the kind of the buzzword for it at the moment. These are the sites which will adapt to your screen size. So if you shrink the screen, the website will shrink at the same time. There's many ways. Mobile SEO is like a whole massive topic. Basically, there's lots of ways you can approach the problem. You can approach it by having two different websites, and the problem there is the fact that if they don't link up, if you go through to one page from the search engines, sometimes you get redirected to a completely different page, and that's actually bad for SEO. But if you go through to the same page, then it's pretty good. Google does love mobile websites at the moment, and will actually rank you better if it thinks that you've got a mobile accessible site. I mean, we've just been looking at one actually, for instance, and there's a lot of tagging that you put on it to sort of say this page is the same as that page, and this page is the one for the mobile version of this page. And it is quite challenging to kind of get it all right, but in essence, it's not sort of rocket science, and basically it's the user experience you have to go for.
Great, thank you. And Robin, do you, in your experience in terms of using screen readers in particular, is the dawning of the mobile site cutting out a lot of the challenges you had before, or is it bringing a lot with it?
There's a 100% overlap with what Gerry's been saying for SEO, in as much as a bloated desktop site with lots of imagery and potentially lots of them not having alternative text, that's the worst case scenario. And on the other end of the sliding scale, you've got a very slim, very concise website that isn't as sort of graphically heavy, so it's probably got more content that's indexable, hasn't got lots of JavaScript or Ajax, this dynamic content that Gerry was talking about, because you can't 100% rely on mobile browsers supporting that, is a dream, not just for SEO, but for accessibility as well. But in between, as Gerry was saying, you've got this golden ground, this sort of ideal place where you've got a responsive site where you don't have to build two sites, you don't have to maintain, do different versions and worry about them cross-linking and you getting thrown off from the mobile into the desktop version, for example. And that's where the main site is responsive. The content has been cut back to make it legible and concise and not bloated and that sort of thing. And yet you've thought about SEO, and as we've heard today, that means that you've also thought about accessibility as well. So that's sort of best of both worlds.
Okay, great, thank you. And so I suppose both, I mean, certainly a mantra that you hear in terms of usability is, potentially start with the mobile first when you're designing a site. Putting mobile at the beginning of the design process is clearly going to pay off in both respects for both SEO and
Certainly
accessibility.
at the center of your thinking when you're designing anything from
Yeah.
scratch nowadays. Absolutely.
From a data point of view, we are seeing, particularly tablet, the explosion and growth there. I think that on many, many particularly non-B2B websites, the proportion of tablet and mobile usage is exploding, so much so that it's 50% of your traffic, even more um, in some of the media sort of websites that we're seeing.
Right. And again, that clarity of just having that single size screen almost, isn't it, that you sort of tend to think that you're designing for. Yeah, and all of the benefits that we're talking about, the clarity and the simplicity, are going to come from that. One more question, and then we're done. You mentioned FAQs. There was just a particular question somebody had. Is it better to have the FAQs on separate pages rather than these long pages of multiple questions? Or should you have multiple FAQ pages for each section or something like that? What's the compromise there?
It's a great question. The issues is it's kind of twofold. One, from a SEO point of view, when you look at when you can answer one particular question on one page, that means your title tags are appropriate, your description tags are appropriate. The downside is something called thin content. If you've got a very short question and a very short answer, it means you haven't got very much content on the page. And Google actually doesn't like something called thin content. If you find that if it comes along and literally there isn't any content on that page, it tends to kind of go, well, there isn't quite enough content on this page, so it tends to, it won't exclude it, but it might rank another page better. So it's what we call the thin content risk, basically there.
And Robin, any
And
final comment about that, about accessibility of individual pages,
yeah,
individual question topics?
I think the sweet spot would be that, think about your audiences. Have you got sort of a distinct number of different stakeholder groups that your website is catering for? For example, there's the professional, there's the consumer, and then think about what the frequently asked questions of those different groups are and subdivide the FAQs into separate pages that just speak to that one audience, because that's going to help the users in general. It's also going to help with SEO, and it's going to help with accessibility as well.
Brilliant. Great, thank you. Well, we're at 2:00, so bang on time. Thank you very much, both of you, for just really a fantastic crossover. I've really enjoyed sitting and listening to you chat in the preparation. I think they've learned an awful lot about the crossover there between SEO and accessibility, and there clearly is a lot of common ground. A big thank you to you, Gerry, for helping us out with this.
My pleasure.
We have got another webinar. We do this monthly. Next month, it's about travel and tourism. And we're going to be reviewing some of the top sites in the travel and tourism sector, looking at how they do for accessibility, but also sort of reflecting on that from a marketing point of view. So this isn't specifically, although it's of interest to people in that sector, it's also very interesting, we hope, for anybody involved in marketing. And I think the same has been true with the SEO, that it isn't just about those people who are in the SEO business, but it clearly spans across a whole range of people who need to think about how their site performs and whether or not it's doing what they need. So thank you very much. As I said, the webinar will be available as a video afterwards. We will put the slides up, and you can contact us in various ways. Contact us through the email addresses, sales@abilitynet.org.uk if you need to talk to our services, gerry.white@sitevisibility.com for Gerry's contact. And there's plenty of other places on the internet you can find us using your favorite search engine as your starting point. So thanks very much, everybody, and see you at the next session.